Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. This episode is sponsored by Rimmel Greenhouse Systems, makers of quality greenhouse structures. Whether you're just getting started or buying your 10th tunnel, Rimmel has a structure to fit your needs. I've purchased and grown in Rimmel houses and would recommend them to everyone. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. This is a special episode. I've got Jordan Green joining us tonight, who's the founder of FarmBuilder 2017 to current, co-owner of J&L Green Farm in Edinburg, Virginia 2009 to current, a United States Marine Corps veteran 2004-2009, and a graduate of the apprentice program at Polyface Inc. Prior to that, he grew up on his family's homestead in Virginia and had several successful small farm enterprises. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Thanks for having me back, Michael. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So give us a little bit of overview of your farm. And then I think where we want to take today's podcast was talking about kids on the farm and making sure they grow up and don't hate it. So I want to give people that before we kind of dive into, maybe go a little off track of that to start off with. But yeah, give us a little bit of a, update of where you are, what you're doing, and what's kind of working.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure as many people might know, my wife, Laura, and I started J&L Green Farm here in Edinburg, Virginia back in 2009, doing, pasture-based production models, direct to retail for a lot of what we do. We're still doing a lot of pigs. So we sell piglets to a lot of other pasture-based regenerative farms, sell a lot of pork cuts, a lot of beef, poultry, and then value-added stuff from other farms in the area. So on-farm store, we supply farm stands and co-ops, a drop site / buying club model, and we do drop shipping nationwide.
All right. Now, COVID was kind of crazy. Tell us a little bit about kind of like how that affected you and how it's now going.
Yeah, I don't know how it was for you guys, but the last would be like 2 years plus a few months has just been a complete sprint for us.
Yeah.
This has been a marathon on steroids, and I think everybody's getting a little tired.
Yeah.
A couple different aspects of COVID is one, an initial huge surge in demand for product that then you try to expand out to meet the demand, and then what happened to us and pretty much every other farm was a big drop off after that. For us, we still are well above where we used to be, but getting used to that roller coaster ride was probably the hardest point of all of that as a business owner. Is there's just no predictability. Sales can vary wildly month to month just based on the panic in the media for that particular day, and what the shortage of the week happens to be. So it's been just a 2-year campaign of nose to the grindstone, having to stay alert, stay nimble, move quickly, and make changes rapidly and adapt to a wildly changing market, both on the sales side and the supply side.
Yeah. And well, think about that. So supply side is, it's interesting. It used to be same day shipping for a lot of the things we used to buy. And now sometimes it's, that's not available for another 4 to 6 weeks, or, it's not going to be available all this year. So you're having to think about alternative suppliers.
Yeah, I just called up a real big national company last week to try to order some replacement covers for these shelters that we have out in the field. Yeah. They got these like vinyl tarp covers, and she laughed at me.
Oh no.
She said, call back in a month, we might have something. I'm like, do you have any of just the units for sale? No, we have none of those. So currently the pigs are on a shoestring shade set up right now that looks like straight out of Mad Max.
Yeah. So is that like shade cloth, or is that like a white?
Well, no, it's just like Shelter Logic. They have those corral shelter kind of things, which are usually pretty cheap. and they work really well. Just, it's been 2-3 years and some of those covers are all ragged out and we just need to replace them, but they got nothing.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. And you look at something like that and you're like, why that of all things?
Right.
Yeah. Because
it might not even be a shortage of the fabric itself. Everyone's got a huge labor shortage right now. Yeah, you can't find qualified, motivated, good people to save your life. I think I'm wondering where all the workers went. They can't all have been COVIDed away.
Yes. Or they've been put in some secret concentration camp somewhere. No, but
they all got raptured away somewhere.
Yeah, we've actually, we struggled last year, and this year's we have breathing room now. We're actually not like pushing to hire anybody. We're trying to run as lean as possible because, we've got most of the key positions filled on the farm, although there's probably 2 hires. If the right person came along, I would hire them in an instant.
Right.
So right now we can get labor, but it's not like that super skilled labor for management material. It's all just hourly people.
Yeah. You can get that by getting a well-qualified, like number 2 type. You just can't compete when the construction industry is offering guys $50 to $100 an hour.
Yeah.
Just to start, and you just can't compete with that as a farm. So you have to find those few people out there that do it for lifestyle reasons as opposed to pay reasons.
Or Target is hiring for $25 starting wage.
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, even local gas stations here, they're starting, just cashiers at $17 an hour. We're having to start, just college kids on summer break who, have never lifted a shovel in their life. We're having to pay $18 an hour, and they work hard, they show up on time, they don't complain, and so I can't complain about it much. But it is a paradigm reset, I think, for all business owners of what the reality of the new labor market is going to be, and where you need to focus your attention. Like you were saying before, you just got to be super lean, highly efficient, to minimize the amount of skilled labor you have to bring to bear.
Yeah, and think about, hey, what machine can I buy to replace labor?
Right. Or what change can I make in how things are done? Just one little change we made this year is we switched from for our sow herd, which was breeding pigs. In the past, we'd always done a morning and an evening feed route for a couple reasons. One, you get a little bit better metabolic return on having 2 feedings as opposed to 1, and also you're getting that second management check for the day.
Yes.
But we've had to go back to just doing 1 feeding a day just to trim that time from the schedule, just to keep other things that are more important than a little bit of feed recovery on your conversion ratio. We've kind of had to ditch that and just focus on, hey, what's the most effective and efficient movement of people around the farm? That's got to be the number 1 thing right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this kind of ties in a little bit to the post you did on Facebook about kids on the farm. Do you want to kind of go ahead and just kind of share what prompted you to have the post and just talk about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of a random thing. A lot of the posting I do is just the inspiration of the moment. It's hard for me to sit down and be disciplined about writing, but when the spirit moves, the words will flow. So it was a couple of weeks ago, and we were grinding feed, which is something we pretty much do every week. And our youngest son, he just kind of showed up and put himself to work for a little while, and I took a little video of it. Thought it was cool. And later on that evening, just had some time and came up with a post for it and put it on Instagram. It links over to Facebook as well. And it must have pleased the Facebook algorithm gods, just precisely, because a normal post for me might get 3,000 to 5,000, maybe 10,000, kind of reach, and this one, as of today, is at like 3.4 million. Wow. Just rocketed across Facebook. I don't I take no credit for knowing how to manipulate their algorithms, but it was
Yeah.
it was something that resonated with a lot of people and got a lot of shares and a lot of conversation going. And it was on what I made a post, the text part of it was just how we have approached having our kids on the farm and working in the business. And, both Laura and I are, you could say we have a biased opinion on it based from our own life experiences growing up in family businesses. And it's, something that we've had, conversations about and tried to be intentional with how we're going to approach, our kids working in the business and interacting with it. And, finding a way that we can instill some work ethic and character into them, but we're not using them as our, child labor force in the business. Both of us believe that compelling children to work in a business is not right. That it is our business and it should be our work to make that business a success. Now, that doesn't mean that the kids can't work in the business, but we're going to treat them like an adult. That if they want to do adult things, which is, working for a business is an adult thing. And this is separate from, the household chores. You got to pick up your laundry. You got to keep your stuff cleaned up. You got to help with the dishes kind of thing. We live in the house. This is that separate topic of working in the business. And what? Adults who work in your business, they get paid. So we're going to replicate that with our kids. The kids aren't making $100,000 a year kind of thing, but we want to foster a direct correlation in their young developing minds that, hey, the quality of work that I do and me showing up for a job directly impacts the amount of Skittles that I can have. Or the computer stuff that I can buy. Our oldest son is nuts on building computers and playing Rocket League is his thing right now, which makes no sense to me, but I'm not a 13-year-old boy anymore. Right? That's right. And so, making that connection of, hey, the advancement that I want for myself in my life is going to be tied to work at some point. And if I work for mom and dad and I do this, things that are outlined for me, I can get paid for it. And that's kind of been our approach for several years now. And, for better or for worse, that's how we're doing it and how our kids are responding to it. So, back to the post, it stimulated some good conversation about, what's that role that children play in a farm business? Should they just be out there to work for mom and dad, whenever mom and dad need helpers, or should it be something where it's a little bit more organized and laid out and compensated and structured? And there's a wide variety of opinions out there in the ether.
Yeah. So now you grew up in a family business, right?
Yeah.
And what was that business?
So my dad's actually a landscaper. He's had his own landscaping company for maybe 42 years now, I would guess. He had it before I was born, and I don't remember the first time that I went out to work. And kids go out to work with their parents, but it's really not work, when you're 5 years old and 7 years old kind of thing. So it's a real dichotomy as a child working in your parents' business that, you want to be with dad. And, for me, especially as a kid, you go work with dad. That's when you can have like the lollipops and the Sprites, the stuff that you can't have at home. You can get the sugar when you go out with pops. And
that's exactly like it is here, even though my wife doesn't know.
Yeah, I mean, sugar is, is the great incentivizer of child labor. Hey, kid, you spread this mulch all day and I'll give you a lollipop. Sweet, good deal.
Yeah, Simon goes with me to the hardware store, and he always seems to show. We get there and he's like, I've got a quarter. I'm gonna get myself a gumball. I was like, where'd you find the quarter?
Right. I took it out of your truck.
Yeah.
And so I worked in my parents' business until I was 19. and moved out of the house and went to Polyface to do my my apprenticeship there. And so for me, my childhood and youth was very work centric, to the point that even school was a secondary priority. That if I wanted to get that stuff done, I was doing it in the morning or in the evening. Work a lot of times took priority over that, and certainly over the more optional kind of thing, like organized sports or hanging out with friends or things like that. So for me, my teenage years is a memory of work.
So that was, it was like 60 hours a week. Like landscaping is tough work.
Yeah, it would depend. A typical day, especially I would say from when I was 15 on, was during the school year, me doing school from say 5:30, 6 o'clock till 7 or 8, and then we'd be out landscaping all day and be back maybe 6 or 7 in the evening, and have farm stuff to do then, which was a combination of, some of it was things that I had going on. So like I had a herd of dairy goats that I was milking. So that was, that was my business. I had my little side hustles going on as a kid, certainly. And some of it was more of the chores that were family type of stuff. But it was very typical to be I would say a 9 to 10, 11 hour day of working in the family business.
Yeah. Now, in that family business, were you just a laborer? Did your again, your parents are still alive, so some of this might be right.
Yeah. They're both still alive. I was, my dad definitely bragged to me and said I was, his number 2 guy. Certainly I was, by the time I was 16 or 17, probably the most experienced guy because of turnover that you have. But it was a combination of, it was not a big business. It was usually him and me and maybe 2 or 3 of the other brothers. Occasionally he would have outside hired help, but this was essentially a family business, just not a family farm. It was a family landscape business. So all of us were hustling the mulch, and edging the beds and digging the holes and mowing the grass, type of stuff. My background was a little different because when I was 13, we moved to New York, and then like literally the next year we started with animals, and then that year after that it was the farm. And so I ended up kind of being the lead on that, and all my siblings worked for me. I wouldn't say I did that the best. They got paid, but they sometimes didn't have a choice whether to work for us or not too. So right.
I think a lot of their memories of me is me telling them what to do, or bossing them around pretty much. So
right.
Which I'm sure is just not, it's not a normal childhood. But
I think it's something, the older I've gotten, the more I've realized how abnormal a childhood it was. I had my first side hustle business when I was 8, delivering newspapers. By the time I was 12, I was doing a paper route for myself every morning, like dark, going out and delivering newspapers, and then, mowing some yards on the weekend. And, that funded my fishing lure, expense budget. And, that felt normal at the time, but there's a lot of kids who, their parents bought them fishing lures. And so I don't believe in kind of the woe is me mentality, that I'm sure all of those experiences crafted me into the person I am today. So I'm not gonna, diss it. But it is an appreciation that it was a very outside of the box type of experience growing up as a kid. And certainly there are things that I missed out on that I wish I could have done.
So you've got that. My mentors, Paul and Sandy, they have 2 kids. The kids, they had to work some on the farm, but they definitely got paid for it. Like their parents maxed out their kid IRAs or whatever.
Right. The education fund or what have you.
So they're gonna, and I don't know, they're gonna be set after a while, when stuff happens, because they maxed that out. They, that they're gonna be pretty well set. But I mean, one of their kids is working still on the farm. The other has his own farm related business. That came because he worked on the farm, and again, both very well adjusted individuals now. And it's just interesting the different ways people do it, and I think it depends on what you take of it. I mean, like, you just chose just to keep going and move on with it, and some other people really get completely turned off from the farm, and I've seen that where the kids want nothing to do with the parents' farm. And
right,
I mean, yeah, we know a lot of farmers that are like that. I think it also comes back to, I mean, we don't want the kids to hate the farm. So let's talk through that. I mean, what do you think about being on a farm, made to work? What do you think about that makes kids want to hate the farm?
Well, I mean, in my own experience, it was more of a homestead kind of thing and not a commercial farm. But I certainly have a lot of friends who grew up as being children on a farm, and some have left, some have stayed. I think there's a lot of things that feed into that for a child. Some of it, I think, is, are you compelled to work, or is it something you're doing as an outflow of an interest that you have, that you want to be part of the farm and participate there. I think as kids get older, and certainly I've seen this in friends who have hit like their 20s, 30s, and 40s, is the influence of the decision-making process on the farm. That, if you're 40 years old and still being treated like a 15-year-old on the farm, and everything's got to run through dad and grandpa, and you can't make a decision one way or the other. Well, two things. One, you should never treat someone who's working for your farm that way as an owner.
Yeah.
But somehow there's this license that if it's your kids, well, you can do that. And you see that a lot. And I think that will lead to a lot of resentment of, hey, I'm still at dad's beck and call, and I'm 35 years old, and I'm not being treated as an adult. I can't have any influence on the decisions that are made around here. And I'm just marking time till he kicks the can, and I can have the place and do what I want.
I think another thing to throw out there too is, if the farm is never run like a business that's profitable, and it always comes back to where the farm isn't making money and dragging you down as a family, you're never going to want to continue that. I mean, at least if you're smart, you are. Right.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother topic of, is this farm being run as a business, or is this a subsidized lifestyle that, everybody's working outside jobs, and then we just do this in the evenings and bale hay on the weekends kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to keep in mind is it's just every farm is such a unique context to itself, and the pieces that are brought to bear on that. For us, the decision was, look, this is our business. This is what we want to do.
Yeah.
It would be great when the kids are adults, if we're still farming then, if they want to work in it and be part of that. But our acceptance and love and pride of our, in our children is not in any way tied to them working for us. We want them to be successful in what they have passions for and motivations for, and not what our passion and motivation is.
Yeah. In that, you just earlier, you mentioned, okay, Skittles, you get more Skittles, you work, but you also just mentioned making sure that you don't tie, let's say, your love or appreciation or what they get to that too. So that's a fine line, I think, there too. You just have to be very clear on why they're getting what they're getting, and the different aspects of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's very age segmented. That, our 13-year-old that works for us, he's making he's making well over $10,000 this year, working the summer for us, but he's earning every cent of that. And that's very different than, say, a 6-year-old who comes out and basically just wants to hang out with you and helps out a little bit, but you want to reinforce that, hey, if you do adult work, which this is practicing for adult work, then there's going to be adult rewards, and we're going to simulate that adult reward with, going out to get some ice cream or, the Skittles or what have you. So I think it's knowing what motivates each child and what, what's an appropriate level of that compensation for their effort being, because, what we're trying to reinforce is that when you work for the business gives you something in return. There's a payoff for your effort. You're not doing this just because you want mom and dad's approval, or to be part of the family. This is, even though it is a family farm and a family business, this is not a family dynamic here. This is a business dynamic here.
Okay. I like that distinction.
And then when we're in the house and being a family, that is the family dynamic that is there. And you see that a lot. I'm sure you have with the consulting you've done, of that bleed over from one into the other in family farm businesses, that you have elements of the business that have the dysfunction of the family being drug into them. And then you have the dysfunction of the business being drug into the family dynamic. And, no one wants to do Thanksgiving with each other. And, they scream and yell at each other about different things. It can get real ugly real fast if you don't have, what's that term? The Chinese wall between the two. That look, business stuff's business stuff and family stuff is family stuff.
Well, and I think the thing that really starts to see is, I think a lot of it can be kept under the rug when you just got a family going out together. But when the kids start to grow up and start getting married, and so the wives start giving a little bit of, or the husbands start giving a little bit of a better idea of what's going on, they're like, sure, what's going on here? You're doing what for what? So I think that aspect. And so, seeing a family that still has Thanksgiving together, you're right. And they're all in the same business is very different and very cool to see.
Yeah. You have to be, I think it's something you have to be very intentional about the elder generation. I'm going to throw that out there. As the elder generation, you have to be very intentional about communicating that and then backing that up with your actions. That, for the kids, you working in the farm business has nothing to do with whether we're going to love and treat you, well as a child.
Yeah. So there is, so you're always our child. We're always going to love you. If you want to work in the business, there will be different rewards for that work than just being a part of the family. I think that's right there. That summarizes that.
Nelson carrot, Satakoy melon, buffalo tomatoes, Megatron leek. What do all these varieties have in common? Well, they're all dinosaurs or varieties that were dropped by the trade for one reason or another. So what do smart growers do? Well, if they can, they buy a bunch of seed before it goes out of stock and freeze it while they scramble to find new varieties that are going to work better. But the problem is that eventually seed vitality goes down and the seed is no longer good. Is there anything you can do to revive the seeds? Well, introducing Ultra, an organic seed treatment, or as I like to say, a seed defibrillator. To back up a bit, we were able to get 20 kernels of what we now call Gill's Select, a rare Indian corn variety from Gill's Sweet Corn Farm in the Hudson Valley. We grew it out, distributed it to a number of farmers, and then life happened. About a decade later, I found the seed at the bottom of our freezer, and we took most of the seeds and tried to germinate them in a greenhouse. Only a few came up. Not enough to have good genetic diversity. Last year, with only a few handfuls left and a Hail Mary attempt, I soaked them with Ultra for 24 hours, then struck them into some trays and popped them into our germ chamber. 72 hours later, we started seeing shoots, and this year, even with an 8-week drought, we had a wonderful yield of corn. We sold some and kept back most of it for future seed stock. I'm confident that we wouldn't have been able to continue this lost variety without Ultra. Here's the best news yet. AgriGrow has agreed to offer a 10% discount to all Thriving Farmer listeners. Simply use the coupon code THRIVE when you check out. Again, that is THRIVE for a 10% off discount on your first order. Go to smallfarm.solutions for more information.
Let's talk about this too, because I know this, I've seen this too, where they say, well, dad is always working in the business. I don't want to have that kind of business because it consumed him. So how do you make sure you keep that, back to that Chinese wall, divide of having off farm or just separate farm time?
Well, I think it's I don't know if that's necessarily the indicating factor of someone being a workaholic or a couch potato.
Yeah.
Is a business ownership. I know some business owners that never leave their house. That they inherited a business, everything's kind of going along, and they're just at home all the time. And they're not motivated to get out and function and do something in the business.
Yeah.
And then other people who are entry level type workers who are extreme workaholics. So I don't know, maybe is it a bit of an excuse to blame the business for parents' busyness?
Well, absolutely.
Maybe that's just who they are. But I think it's for us, it's something that we communicate with the kids about, because we've had some of these conversations like, why can't we go on vacation and stuff? And it's being honest with the kids, appropriate to their age level, and saying, look, we are working hard in the business now to achieve this goal. We are moving towards this goal that will be a legacy for our family. And this is the time when, dad or mom and dad, we are doing this for the family and for our future together. And obviously having a balance to that, taking those times to go and do things with the kids, but carving out ways that, we probably spend more time with our kids than almost anybody else, because we're around all the time and they're around all the time. It's just that a lot of the time we are working, but they have opportunities to be with us and see how, how we behave as adults in a work environment that a lot of other kids don't get to have. And, back to my own experience working in my own father's business, there was certainly a lot of very advantageous experience there as, a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, seeing how, he as a business owner interacted with customers and how those customers interacted with me, and, the little old ladies who want to give you hot chocolate, when you're shoveling their snow and stuff, and just how that dynamic of interacting with other people outside of your social network works. There's a lot of value, I think, for a child to see and experience the business. Kind of, the line I'm trying to hold or thread on this is there's got to be a difference between compelled participation and incentivized participation.
Well, I think one thing too is that there are so many positive skills and traits that come from working in a business and being around a business that's run well. And that's one of the best legacies you can leave, is obviously A, to work hard, B, to critically think, and C, be able to market. I mean, obviously there's other ones out there that I'm listing right here, but that's what I'm just going to riff off right now and say, having them around that is just so helpful. It gives them such a huge leg up.
Yeah. I mean, having an 18 or 19-year-old who grew up in the family business and wants to stay, man, that guy knows so much more than people that you're hiring, especially on a farm. You just cannot replicate a growing up around equipment and knowing how to operate equipment safely and what are the little idiosyncrasies of each piece of machinery. If you have someone who spent their growing up years learning how to do that, they run circles around adults. I would trust a 17-year-old kid who grew up on a farm operating equipment. I would trust him operating equipment far more than a 40-year-old who's never been around it.
Yeah, my previous farm, we had he was 18, but he was our equipment driver, and he did a fabulous job. So far ahead. One of the things, just the other day, my wife kicked the 5-year-old out of the house because he was bouncing off the walls. She's like, go hang out with your dad. So we got to come back, and we were fixing irrigation, but there ended up being a dead rabbit, and I think a fox got it, which is kind of unusual because we're an urban farm with neighborhoods all around us. But he literally spent 20 minutes just sitting there, kicking that thing or pushing that thing around with a stick, just trying to figure out, what it was and,
Right.
different bugs on it and stuff. But,
Right.
and, that's the kind of experience you'll always remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a balance, it's, childhood can be a great development zone for learning what work is, and participating in a workplace, but we need to make sure that that balance is being preserved of, hey, it's fine to go to soccer camp for a week in the summer, and it's fine to go spend the night over at your friend's house and, go to their pool party, even though mom and dad are still home working in the business.
Yeah.
We can do 70 hours a week in a business, but they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And
And one of the one of the leg up we have here is my in-laws are literally 6 minutes away. So
nice.
It's good to go over there and hang out, and they get to take them some places. So, I mean, like I tell, if you've got young kids, having that support network is so key. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, trying to run a farm with little kids, that can be very tough.
Yeah. I mean, community is so important, and that's such a big part about the whole regenerative agricultural movement is, the community of eaters and the community of, the soil and the animals and plants. And we need to make sure to maintain the community of humans, as well. If it can't be reflected in quality relationships and quality food, and quality experience, then what are we slaving away for on these things?
Yeah. Now, one thing, obviously, training kids to work hard is important, but you also don't want to scare them off. You also don't want them to be, I just had to work too much.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found any things, tricks? Have you, what's your thoughts on that?
Like anything that you're training at, it's about going to failure, and then doing one more, and then we're done. So if you're wanting to get really good at lifting weights, you're going to train that muscle group to failure at times. Not every time, but you're going to have a point where, all right, we're going to do deadlifts to failure and see where it's at. And so, I think it's different for each kid of knowing what's their capacity and can they get pushed just a little bit further to know, hey, I normally don't get up till 7 o'clock in the morning, but on this type of day, I'm going to get up at 6 or at 5:30 or whatever. And hey, it'll be okay to wake up a little bit early, roll out of bed and go do something. Or, if I'm carrying like our 13-year-old, he's working on the poultry enterprise this year. He started at the beginning of the season not being able to carry 2 buckets of feed very well from one part of the field to the other for the chickens. And he was asking about it, and I was like, you get better by doing it. So put however much you can in the bucket, hold it correctly and start walking, and then put a little bit more in, a little bit more. And, now he can carry 2 full buckets wherever he needs to go. So it's, showing them, knowing what their limit is, respecting that, and then saying, all right, well, we want to get you better at this. What's the next step that you can do to get better? We're not going to take that child and say, all right, you need to go run a marathon today. And, he's never run more than just a little bit around the soccer field. Having kids in a business, it's a training experience for them. Oh, certainly. You want a master course in hands-on leadership, have a gaggle of children working for you on something, because they don't BS about stuff. No. They will straight up ask a question, or they'll show their emotion on something that they won't they won't be as hidden about what their feelings about it as as adults might be. And then also just setting the example. If you've got the kids out in the garden pulling weeds and you're sitting on the patio sipping a pina
Yeah.
colada, what kind of
Yeah.
example are you setting for the kids?
Yeah.
So it's working with them, saying, hey, taking time to stop and explain the why, and here's why we're doing it this way, and this is what the result of that's going to be. And then saying, okay, well, you can carry 2 half buckets, well, watch me carry 2 full buckets, and set the bar for them kind of to to rise to as
Yeah.
they grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about what success looks like. You lay out what success looks like for your 13-year-old and what his job is. Is that something you've clearly communicated?
Yeah. So,
We
for him, we had a conversation, over the winter, during the school year, of saying, hey, we know you have these things that you really want. You want this $2,000 computer and, this mouse that has, 5,000 clicks per second, or whatever.
Yeah.
Things that I could care less about, but are very important to him. And, this is the way that you can achieve those goals. And he's like, yeah, I want to work. And they're like, all right, well, we have a work agreement that all of our employees have. And so, we made one up for him that, hey, this is the responsibilities that you're going to have. You're going to work underneath whoever is running the poultry enterprise. So you're going to be, responsible to them for what they're having you do, and working with them. You're going to work with the butcher team, and kind of laying out, all right, this is how much you're going to get paid for the whole season. And, these are the standards that we're going to hold you to, just like you're an adult, because, especially at 13, you're really into, some heavy training in adulting, hopefully by that point. But, in his contract, it also says Justin will be gone for this week for this camp. He'll be gone this week for this other camp. And, his supervisor knows that, and we know that, and we're going to have to cover for that, because we don't want his summer to be just working away. We've also laid out, hey, with your pay that you're getting, we want you to put at least this much of it into savings for, a truck or whatever your first vehicle is going to be. We want you to give some of it, whether you're giving it to a children's hospital or, some other charity. And then this much is going into your account. So, I mean, he has two bank accounts. How many 13-year-olds that have 2 bank accounts? But he has
Very few.
a savings account, and he has his, let's say, operating account.
Yeah.
And he's had to learn some lessons about managing the money that is there. A month or 2 ago, he was like $20 short on what he wanted to get the whole build out for his computer, and he's like begging and pleading for the extra $20. And they're like, well, no, because you spent money on this a few weeks ago, and so now you're a little bit short, so you're gonna have to wait till the next payday to have enough for what you want. And of course, in the moment, might get a little emotional and upset, but it's, you got to stand fast and say, hey, this is how it is being an adult, man. If you don't have the money for what you want. And he loves to argue and debate and troll a little bit. So he's like, well, I could just get a credit card. And like, well, no, mom and dad are not going to let you do that.
No. Yeah.
So you are setting the guardrails as the parent of, this is the zones that we're going to operate in.
Yeah.
But inside of here, hey, if you want to spend your discretionary money on getting a computer, that's fine. If you want to spend it on, getting a dirt bike, that's fine. It's kind of whatever your particular interests and tastes are. That's the direction that we're going to allow you to flourish in.
Mm-hmm. Talk about microenterprises, because I know that's something that, some kid, I have another friend that has multiple kids that are working in around his business, and they've all chosen to do their own microenterprises. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. Our 2 other kids are very entrepreneurial, and their microenterprise has been painted rocks.
Okay.
So they're very crafty, and so they paint rocks. And they sell them in the farm store for $1,
Okay.
or some of them are even like $3 or $5,
Yeah.
and then they guilt trip customers into buying something.
It's all about the guilt trip. I mean, my daughter sells bouquets of flowers, and she just stands there and says, "Hey, look at my beautiful flowers," and then they have to buy them.
Right. And I mean, like our 8-year-old son, he makes robots out of empty Gatorade bottles, and
Okay.
and sells these robots. And I was like, no one's ever gonna buy that. Sure enough, he sold them. Yeah, I don't know if he's gotten full asking price for them. Um,
Yes.
but they have these other little things going, and that's certainly something we want to encourage them.
Yeah.
I would say we're not at the point where any of them have a real serious side hustle where they're having to order stuff and manage
Yeah.
cash flow, and but maybe that'll come in the
Oh, yeah.
coming years.
Yeah. Now, what kinds of things do you do to make sure you enjoy the farm or enjoy with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, that's a $1 million question. Yeah, how do you enjoy the farm and enjoy the kids being with you? To me, I think it's a balance thing. That there's times that the kids come out and we can have a good time, but there's certainly times where you have to say, hey, this is I need to do this myself. This is not a situation where you can be with me. This is a dangerous thing, or I gonna be gone for a while or something like that, and you can't come. And maybe just have something else for them to do, or having a way to compensate for it. But like we about every week now are driving to Pennsylvania with loads of pigs to slaughter. And so they're kind of on a rotation who gets to ride with me, for that trip. They're not doing any work at all. They're just coming along for the snacks. But that's time that they can spend with dad. There's other times where I'll bring them along and have a little project that they definitely can help with. Maybe we're going to pick up a bunch of small rocks and throw them in the gator and go dump it in a mud hole on one of the farm lanes, and that's something that they can definitely help with. And so it's just trying to work in those times that they can be with you, and when you need to say nope, I got to go do this, and you can't be with me, because farming is certainly a dangerous occupation, and there's things you don't want children. You don't want children being around when the disc vine is running, or round balers, or things that can cause bodily harm instantaneously to them. You
can't ride on the tractor with dad for these tasks, but you can ride when daddy does this.
Right. Yeah. We're not going to stand on the forks of the tractor going down the road. That's just not a good idea.
Yes. Yeah. Think forward a couple of years. What do you think that looks like? Have you thought of that?
Yeah. One of the things Laura and I have had a lot of discussions about is, especially in the next, say, 5 to 10 years. So, we have a 13 through 8-year-old, and the next 5 to 10 years is really that formative years for them, moving into being an adult.
Yeah.
And, it was a discussion we had a couple months ago was, what do we really want the next 5 to 10 years to look like? Do we want it to be an experience of us doing 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, to keep a large farm going? Or do we want to make sure that we have mechanisms in place where we can prioritize those experiences as a family and doing things together, educational things, recreational things, adventures, what's going to be, what are we going to look back in 10 years and say, wow, that was a good 10 years that we spent there? Or are we going to look back and say, well, we just slaved away for another 10 years on the farm? And so for us, I think we're really leaning towards the direction of, hey, we want to make sure that experiences that neither of us really got to have as, that 10 through 18-year-old, that we're providing those for our kids. We're participating with them and, guiding them into that early adulthood. That really is, I think, what our priority is going to be. And we're going to make the farm fit around that instead of making the family fit around the farm. So, where that pans out in 3, 5, 7 years, I don't know. We'll just have to take it as it comes.
So you're just going to intentionally take a step back or do less on the farm to make sure that your kids have those experiences that they're going to remember.
Yeah, I think it's a redirect of what the priorities are. Of, hey, we're going to, instead of pushing to, capture that next big customer or acquire that next farm or what have you. We're going to say, hey, us doing these things as a family is the priority, and let's then tailor our annual business plan around that, and see what those pieces put together shake out to be, so that if we want to take the kids to the Grand Canyon, we can do that, and we're not tied back home because, well, dad decided we're going to raise another 1,000 pigs this year, and here we are doing pigs again.
Yeah. Or we've got to butcher chickens every 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what do we want the kids to remember? Do we want them to remember having, working, certainly, but having fun and experiences with mom and dad? Or do we want to just be, we worked the entire time?
Yeah. There's that aspect of, okay, we worked hard and that earned us the Grand Canyon. And I think that's something for them to know. Yeah. All right. Any final words of wisdom before we go? Jordan, this has been a great conversation.
Oh, I don't know if these are words of wisdom. I mean, we're just, it's the funny thing, maybe you can relate to it, that as you move through, your 30s, I just turned 40 a month ago. That, you realize that all the adults that, were that age when you were growing up, they're just kind of figuring it out the same as you were. Or as you are, you're like, okay, I'm figuring out 35 now. All right, I'm figuring out 40 now. Adults don't have it all figured out. We're basically all just a bunch of big kids making our way through life. So for us, it's just setting what's the priority going to be, and what's this all about. And most importantly, if you're just talking about it from the business standpoint of, hey, it's not a sustainable farm model if the only way you can make it work is by having your 10 kids be the labor force in it. You got to make it work with adults and adult wages and all, everything that entails. And the kids are here as a training program for them to be good adults, not as a labor pool for my business to even exist.
I think you nailed something right there, because around us, there's, everyone talks about the Amish tomatoes and the Amish beans, and there's no way we can compete with those prices. And the reason those prices are is because they have those 10 kids and they're not paying those 10 kids.
Right. You can't sell tomatoes for 50 cents a pound. What's wrong with you, Michael?
I actually was talking to someone was it yesterday or Wednesday? And yesterday. And he was saying he thought his cost to grow a pound of tomatoes was $5. And he's a very good grower. And so I respect that. But and that's what he thinks he has to charge to make money. He said, that's my lost leader. And I'm like, my gosh. But
well, and it's, I think it's something that everyone carries a little bit of responsibility for, that us as producers, we need to be managing the business and pricing accordingly and educating the consumer. But also as a consumer, you carry responsibility that, hey, the way that you're spending money, are you supporting child labor? It's a big thing, especially in textiles of, hey, are these clothes or these boots coming from child labor, overseas, or, are these, what do they call them? Conflict minerals, conflict diamonds, or are these child laborers who are, digging this stuff up out of the ground in, some other country.
The child labor Teslas. I
don't know about that, but we'll let Elon figure that one out.
Yes.
And we, a lot of the world has been built on child labor. And you look at photos of child labor in the United States and in the coal mines and iron mines and all that. And, it seems that agriculture is kind of the last bastion of child labor. The amount of regulation that's non-existent for kids working on farms is quite shocking. I'm not saying we need more regulation, but maybe what we need is just more responsibility taken both as producers and consumers, that, hey, what maybe the reason that, those tomatoes are 50 cents a pound, or those eggs are $2 a dozen, or what have you, is because there's an army of children out there working to produce that food.
Yeah,
So-
I think you hit it right there, is that, yeah, personal responsibility aspect, because I think neither of us want more regulation, but it's something that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we settle a pretty high-end grocery store, and they're very well known. Let's just put it that way. And they talk about how much local stuff they buy. And so I finally figured out their local strategy. They literally just go to the local Amish auction. And they're
Yeah.
buying
Produce auction.
pallets and pallets and pallets of product at, prices I can't even touch.
Right.
So anyway, just interesting to, as you start to figure out the behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
There's, it's a dark underbelly that's out there, of child labor and immigrant labor, and basically an exploited workforce in agriculture that there's a reason that cheap food is cheap.
Yeah. And there's a reason why, if you look at the government won't touch it, because of how it affects different people in the government.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, Jordan, this has been a fun conversation. Thanks so much for popping in and being willing to do this. And hopefully this is something that few people will find helpful. It's helpful to me, as I have a 5, a 7, and a 10-month-old, and a couple definitely 5-6 years behind you start to think about they're interested in the farm, but how do we make sure that my 7-year-old, she's all sorts of entrepreneurial. My 5-year-old, you'll have to drag him to take the compost out. So,
yeah. It's fostering and growing and training adults is what we're doing, and so just trying to do the best that we can. And certainly think these are topics that need to be discussed, and certainly there's a lot of interest out there to discuss them.
Yes, which shows by your post. Well, Jordan, thanks so much. We will link to that post. It's on your Facebook, your Jordan Green public Facebook page. So go there, check that out, and we will link to that in the episode so you can check out what he did. He posted it. But again, Jordan,
good deal.
Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Michael. Take care.
This episode is sponsored by Rimmel Greenhouse Systems, makers of quality greenhouse structures. Whether you're just getting started or buying your 10th tunnel, Rimmel has a structure to fit your needs. I've purchased and grown in Rimmel houses and would recommend them to everyone. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.